Utility versus inquiry. Inquiry versus utility. Inquiry, attempting to learn something for the sake of learning it. Utility, attempting to use the information for some practical purpose. And I see this sort of clash between utility and inquiry. There's, you know, groups of people that I'll say overvalue utility and practicality over inquiry, and they sort of diminish the value of inquiry and the value of attempting to understand the underlying mechanisms of how reality works. And there's this sort of fallacy and there's this sort of appeal to utility that people that value utility overwhelmingly more than inquiry, and they disvalue inquiry, is a sort of fallacy where you get these people that they'll be like, "Oh, we don't care about that science stuff. That's useless. That's not practical. That's not useful." And it poses the question, like, useful to what? It's like you only use this information to try to fit it in the current happenstance of whatever is useful in that specific time period, in that specific place, in that specific setting. Whereas if you attempt to understand the underlying mechanisms of how reality works, you can take that knowledge, those theories, and apply to any situation because you actually understand how it works. You can take, if you're stuck in the practicality utility mindset. I'm not saying that both have their merits, obviously, because we live in a physical world. We have to get shit done. But I'm mostly speaking to the sort of extremes of each end, or sort of the extremes, the people that denigrate inquiry. That's the part I actually don't understand, because they'll denigrate inquiry and then appeal to something that has been built on the foundation of scientific inquiry. That doesn't make sense. Like, an example is when people say side effects, like this thing has side effects. Well, they assume that their use of that thing is the inherent purpose of that thing. They confuse function with purpose. You know, there's no such thing as side effects. Things do things, and the arbitrary use is determines whether the effects are desired or not desired. But you wouldn't understand that without inquiry, without actually attempting to understand how the thing works. If you just start with, we need to use this thing in this specific way, and then you make the assumption that that way is the only way that it could be used, or it's in some way right inherently in some cosmic sense, and then you say that there's no use, there's no utility, there's no practicality in attempting to learn how the thing works. That's when I think you're making a mistake, because I don't understand how attempting to understand how reality works, and making a accurate model of reality, you're attempting to make your worldview line up with reality as much as possible, as accurate as possible. How is that ever a bad thing? How is that ever not practical? How is that ever not useful? To me, that would be the ultimate utility, because again, understanding how the world works, the deep underlying mechanisms, those can be applied in any way you want them to. Because again, reality works a certain way. If your model doesn't match up with that, you will run into, a physical object, because we live in a physical world, and you're gonna have a inaccurate model of reality, and going to get bad results. So basically, analyze the situation, make an informed decision. An example of valuing utility versus inquiry would be the way society tells people to go to college. The reason why society indoctrinates people to go to college is so that they can earn a degree that would give them favor to an employer. They don't really tell you to go to college so that you can broaden your horizons, further your education, so that you can become a more informed human. So it's this sort of appearing like you're smart rather than actually being smart and informed. So that's an example. Now, I think that the fundamental point, the fundamental distinction in this topic is that there are some people that they want to appear right. They want to be right in an argument. They want to be perceived as right, having the right answer, than actually having the right answer, than actually being informed on reality. It's like this sort of, you get into an online debate. You want to win the debate. It's like they don't actually care about whether or not their beliefs are likely true. I think that's the core difference, because that's when you get people like the same people that downplay science are the same people that use veterinary worm medication to treat an upper respiratory infection. The same people that inject bleach intravenously. This is the point. This is the point that people ignore. They think that they can ignore the consequences of ignoring reality. You can ignore reality, but you can't ignore the consequences of ignoring reality, because we live in a physical universe. If your depiction, if your model of reality is inaccurate in any way, you're going to run into physical objects that are either there or that you didn't know were going to be there, or that you expected to be there and weren't there. This manifests in literally in any and every way. Whether you're getting scammed, whether you're getting injured. I mean, I could just go on. But, it's a sort of exceptionalism that, a Dunning-Kruger effect. Dunning-Kruger effect that the people that are not, in the trenches, so to speak, having intellectual diligence, having intellectual rigor to test their hypothesis over and over to see, am I actually right? Challenging their beliefs. It's the people that benefit from these sorts of things in the effort of these people that are having intellectual diligence, and those people write off the scientists. It's interesting. It's like we stand on the shoulders of giants. We stand on the shoulders of giants. That's where that exceptionalism comes in. I mean, I think that's an example of when that overvaluing this sort of utility. I would even say it's a fallacy. It's a fallacy. You're appealing to some sort of utility, whether or not that utility actually exists. Like, for example, let's say someone was saying that we should abolish slavery, and then someone made an appeal to utility. Well, we can't abolish slavery because we need that free labor. It's gonna mess up the economy. How are we gonna abolish slavery? It's gonna mess up the economy. You're assuming that your current structures, your current systems are inherently the right way to do things. You're assuming that your position is correct, and then you're appealing to it instead of actually providing a demonstration of a justification for why your beliefs are likely true. So that's the thing. I actually see that a lot when this sort of. Pretty sure you've encountered this at some point when you're parlaying some sort of you know scientific fact, if you will, space or chemistry or some sort of subject that the general populace doesn't value because it doesn't really directly earn currency, or the sort of mainstream society, get money, productivity sort of thing. If it doesn't appeal to that, then they basically write it off as impractical or just not useful or worthless. Kind of like the thing when people say, when you go to college for a liberal arts degree, oh, that's worthless, you're not going to make any money, but you assume that that person was going to get that degree with the sole purpose of obtaining currency, but you've just completely ignored the possibility that they could just be trying to literally get an education, which on the surface, which you say go to college to get an education, but you don't actually mean that. You mean go to college to get a piece of paper so that you can potentially impress some future potential employer. But yeah. Kind of like tips too. That's another example of that. You know, uh, tips. The fact that this notion that the employer can legally pay under a under the minimum wage, not a living wage to its employees, that the customers have to supplement under the coercion of some sort of social shaming mechanism, some sort of honor system that they have to be shamed into supplementing the employer's economic shortcomings. I don't know. Like I said, it's not even that because it's intentional. They're paying them less because they know that they can get away with it. But and then the people are like, you're an asshole if you don't tip, but you're ignoring the discourse that that system could even be flawed in any way because you're wholly appealing to utility. They can't make a living wage if we don't tip them, which may or may not be true. And I'm not saying to not have any empathy towards that, absolutely, but I'm just using that as an example of when you make this sort of axiomatic appeal to some sort of utility, and then you basically dismissing any sort of rational discourse